But I thought I'd give a bit more of a talk through, starting from the very beginning making a bow. Now, I had this wonderful yew log given to me in exchange for making a bow. It was a guy from Wales, a couple of logs. Now this one was absolutely gorgeous, but like a lot of things, once you start looking, it's not quite as good as you thought. It had what was obviously a dodgy growth ring at some point, and this whole centre section just popped out. It's decent grain, nice thin sapwood, and I've been sitting on it for a while wondering, you know, what to make from it. But you can see here, this is probably where the bad growth ring started, causing it to, you know, get disease in it and then pop out, making that lovely semicircular doodah there. Well, it's sort of screaming at you, make a wide, flat, primitive, or at one point I was thinking go really wide, make like a paddle bow. You can see how wide that is. And then maybe a paddle bow with levers and all sorts. And I thought, no, but it's very clean, maybe a flight bow. And you can end up in total indecision because of the possibilities. And I thought, well, let's start looking at it. And it's lovely and flat here, and you look down it and you think, well, that's nice and straight, until you actually put a string line on it and you think, oh, hang on, that doesn't look quite so straight now. Obviously you don't want to be making a bow with that down the middle of the back, so it's a semicircle, but if we rotate it slightly like that, maybe you can start to see, oh, well, that string line looks straight now. So where actually do you lay the bow out? So if I pull it over at this end to here and correspondingly come across here a bit, you can get a string line like that. That looks a bit straighter. Now, the thing to remember when making a bow is you can't do too much damage with a bit of string and a pencil. So you don't need to rush into it. You can mark it out, think about it, go and have a cup of tea, get your chalk out. There's not necessarily a right and a wrong. Sometimes you can see little hints of twist in the bark. I think that's probably about the right line for the string, and it's symmetrical between these knots, some knots there. It's not too close to this here, so I'm thinking if I rough it out like that, it will get rid of some of that kink at the far end. It will avoid this knot. That's probably about right. See, some people would look at that and think, oh, you could easily get two bows out of that, split it down the middle. But when you actually look, if you come across, cut that in half like that, or like that, you know, turn it into quarters, you don't actually have a huge amount of wood left. Well, you do here for the tip of a bow, but when you get to the centre, you'd find there's not that much. And also, by sod's law, the centre may well be a bit thinner. Anyhow, that'll do for now. That's actually quite interesting. You can see the pin knots coming right through into the centre of the tree. So you can even line them up and say, well, we'll have those in the centre of the bow limbs. Another one there. It's all about examining what you've got and trying to make the best compromise. So there we are, it says on here Wales 2016 question mark. Yeah, there you go. You can also see where these big knots at this end come through to the centre, so that might be a troublesome area, which may mean I have to lose some off this end of the bow, or if I make it very close to the tip, it won't be a problem. See, that's something that people sometimes forget. You've got a bad area, you think, well, if I saw it off here, that'll disappear. but you can probably get away with sawing it off here and having the knot near the tip, because so near the tip of a bow you haven't got much leverage. So potentially you're throwing away, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches off the length of the bow if you cut it off here. Either don't cut it off or cut it off here. You can always cut more off later, but as you rough it, roughing out is a process of successive approximation. Don't try and cut it straight out to finished bow dimension straight away, because as soon as you cut wood it will start moving. It'll all end in tears. Now, so that's marked out my first rough out cut. You can see I will have tons of width. I mean, it's almost like 2 or 3 fingers wide. But when you're trying to manoeuvre a wobbly log through a bandsaw, it's easy to, you know, go slightly on the piss and end up taking off more than you want. And by sod's law, if you make an error, it's always where you don't want it to be. Like if you cut it a bit thin, it doesn't matter at the tip, but if you actually cut it a bit thin, by sod's law it's always in the middle where you want it thickest. So I'll take it gently, I'll rough that out first. Well, that ran through the bandsaw like a knife through butter, and you can see it's looking quite nice. A little bit of twist at this end, or if I hold it a bit, well, you can see it. So this is the problem. It's not a homogeneous piece of material. It's not a cylinder. It's not like a telegraph pole. So I can either say, well, look, that's straight, or if I curve it like that, you say, well, look, it looks a bit bent. And if I have it sitting flat at that end, then it's twisted at this end. So even what looks like a very, very nice log, there's always compromises. And you can see why I don't try and cut it out to accurate dimensions, because you can see it's straight along this right hand edge here where my thumb is, and on this edge it's sort of bowed, but there's plenty of movement. You can also see where it's cut out. It's not cut out radially, it's sort of, well, it's weird, but if I cut across the bottom here, I'll cut that into a flat face to give me a reference, if you like. So a piece of wood, you haven't got any flat straight edges to act as a reference. At the far end that's cut nicely, but if you look down that channel you can see that the channel twists and turns and bends. So it's actually, you know, people say, how long does it take to make a bow? And well, even once you've got the bit of timber, just thinking how to lay it out and getting those initial cuts is a lot more painstaking than people would think. And that's the difference between a stave and something laminated up out of machined timber. It's all compromises. You know, this was the end that doesn't have the knot, so I'm probably better off treating this as the reference face. So keep it nice and flat here, because I'll probably lose some at the other end, which is why I didn't cut it shorter initially. Rough it out by degrees, making your decisions as you go, adjusting, compromising and what have you. Now the other useful thing is, what I've got here is a tiny little offcut. And it's easy to think, oh, if I'd cut it more carefully I might have got 2 bows, 2 staves, or I might have ended up with 2 useless staves. What I've got here is something that could make a little kid's bow, or a miniature. You can experiment, you can make something, I don't know, say 3 foot long, 2 foot long, make a tiny little bow, test it and see what the wood's like. But you can see the sapwood's nice and thin, quite nice tight grain, which again puts a lie to all this nonsense about, oh, Welsh, you know, English yew. Well, Wales is part of England, well, part of the British Isles for anyone who wants to bloody argue, but climatically it's very wet. But I don't know if this was grown on top of a mountain or not, but it's, you don't just need all this stuff about high altitude Italian yew and Pacific yew and Christ knows what. The difference between Pacific yew and this yew is this has got lots of knots in because it wasn't grown in the middle of a tightly packed forest. But anyway, you can see potentially there's a little experimental bow in there, a little kid's bow or something. Or you can even chop it in half, glue the two bits side by side, and make something wide and flat. There's no end of stuff you can do to experiment. The other offcut, very thin and flat. What are we thinking, boys and girls? Are we thinking backing strip? Nice clean sapwood? Nice clean yew sapwood to back a bit of yew that's full of knots? Don't throw your bits and pieces away. To make my second cut, I can treat this nice flat straightish edge as my reference, so that will lay on the bed of the bandsaw. I can mark it out and cut it. But what you see though is if we go to the end where we had those knots protruding from the side, you can't see them now, but you can see it there. So this side of the stave looks like that, and if I just rotate it, the other side looks perfect. So just within the space of 1.5 inches, your wood can change from looking like that to looking like that. But when we rough it down a little bit more and we take some off this edge, get it roughed, we'll get an idea, a better idea of where the bow's going to end up sitting here. If we look here, our reference face should probably be more like that. Don't know if that's showing up. There we are. And the actual bow, because this is the tip of the bow, it's only going to be about that wide. Tip of the bow will sit like that. Now if we're sawing across from here, it'll look like we're cutting into sapwood, so it'll look like there's no heartwood left. So we've got to be careful how we cut. So what I'll probably do, my first cut, I'll probably compromise and come right down here just to square off this bottom edge. As I say, it's a series of approximations. Don't try and cut it straight to size initially, else you could easily have made a mistake and made the bow sitting like this and found you'd got all that weird knotty stuff here in the bow. By having the bow over this side, we're hoping to avoid the knots. Right, I've made that cut and you can see it's looking more like a stave, but you can see how the weird groove down the middle's sort of disappearing. You can also see some of the sort of twist that's in there that will get removed as we rough it down more and more. But you can see the sort of problems we'd have had if we'd tried to cut it straight out first time into the shape of a bow. What is 1/2 inch of misalignment at that end now doesn't matter because it's about 1.5 inches wide. But if we tried to cut it to 1/2 inch tip and we were 1/2 inch out, that wouldn't be quite so clever, would it? Anyhow, looking quite promising. I mean, this knot is still some concern, so how much do we take off that? That's a couple of inches taller than me at the minute. But you see, if we're thinking flight bow, I've got the camera at eye level, so it gives you some idea how tall the stave is. So yeah, that could be quite a nice length for a heavy short draw, sort of 80 pounds at 27 inch, something like that. There you go, that's looking quite a pretty stave now.